Lucas stared at the gleaming sapphire necklace on his workbench, a piece he had meticulously designed for months. As the head designer and co-owner of his family's jewelry company, Lucas poured his soul into every creation. The business wasn't massive, but it had grown to a respectable size under his and his brother Eric's stewardship. Their parents, the original founders, had begun stepping back, content to let their sons drive the company's future. Eric managed the office operations, finances, analytics, and reports. While Lucas crafted stunning designs and oversaw production, Eric ensured everything on the business side ran smoothly. Though they were equal partners in theory, Lucas's role as the elder brother gave him more sway in company decisions. Lucas's wife, Emma, played a different role altogether. She didn't work in the business or hold a career of her own. Instead, she was a devoted housewife, often helping Lucas and Eric's aging parents with errands or appointments. Her warm presence in their lives brought a sense of balance to the busy world Lucas inhabited. But as Lucas immersed himself in his work, tweaking designs and coordinating with the workshop, he began to notice something unsettling. Emma had changed not all at once but gradually. She had grown distant in subtle ways, her laughter less frequent, her smiles tinged with something unspoken. Lucas dismissed it at first, convincing himself it was nothing. He had too much on his plate to dwell on fleeting doubts. What Lucas didn't realize was that his determination to ignore the signs would only deepen the shadows looming over his family. Over time, Lucas began to sense subtle changes around him. It wasn't immediate, but like drops of water slowly filling a glass, unease began to build. At first, he chalked it up to overthinking. Eric had been unusually polite to Emma lately, always offering help, pulling out chairs, and complimenting her in ways that felt just a touch too attentive. But Lucas dismissed it as nothing. After all, they were family, and any old sibling rivalries had been left in the past. The tension started to seep in after a passing comment from a client during a business meeting. "I saw your wife and Eric at that Italian place on Main Street last week," the man said casually, smiling as he sipped his coffee. "Looks like they were having a good time." Lucas felt his chest tighten for a moment. "Oh, they were probably just grabbing lunch," he replied, forcing a light-hearted laugh. And that's what he told himself later, too. It was just lunch. Maybe Emma was discussing something with Eric about the family business, or maybe Eric was helping her out in some way. There was nothing unusual about families spending time together. Lucas prided himself on his family's unity. Betrayal, deception, these things didn't happen in his family. But a crack formed in that certainty a few weeks later. Lucas was reviewing production schedules in the office when he stumbled across something unexpected. A custom jewelry order under Eric's name. That wasn't unusual. Eric sometimes handled gift requests for friends or clients. What stopped Lucas cold was the engraving. It bore Emma's name. The piece was stunning. A delicate gold necklace with an emerald pendant. Emma's birthstone. Lucas felt his heart race as he read the description. Why was Eric secretly ordering something so personal for my wife? Unable to stop himself, Lucas confronted Eric later that evening. Eric was in the office, sorting through some reports, when Lucas walked in, holding a printout of the order. "Eric," Lucas began, his voice calm but firm. "What's this about?" He placed the paper on the desk between them. Eric glanced down at it, and for a split second, Lucas saw something flicker in his brother's eyes. Guilt, maybe, or panic. But Eric recovered quickly, smiling as though Lucas had asked him about a dinner reservation. "Oh, that," Eric said casually, leaning back in his chair. "It's a gift. Emma's birthday is coming up, and I thought I'd get her something special. You know how much she's done for Mom and Dad lately. Just my way of showing appreciation." Lucas stared at him, trying to gauge the truth in Eric's words. "Her birthday's still a while off," he said, his voice steady. "Why didn't you tell me? Why all the secrecy?" Eric spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. "I wanted it to be a surprise," he said, "and you've been so busy with everything here. I didn't want to bother you with something so small." Lucas didn't respond immediately, his eyes narrowing slightly. "We don't keep secrets, Eric," he said. "Not in this family. You know that." "Come on, Lucas," Eric said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. It's just a gift. We're family. I don't see why you're making this into a big deal. The explanation sounded reasonable enough, but Lucas couldn't shake the tension coiling in his gut. The way Eric dismissed his concerns only deepened his unease. That evening, when Emma returned home from helping his parents, Lucas decided to broach the subject carefully. As they sat in the living room, he casually brought up her relationship with Eric. So, Eric mentioned he's been planning something for your birthday, Lucas said, watching her closely. Nice of him, don't you think? Emma stiffened slightly, a faint shadow crossing her face before she smiled. Yes, he mentioned that. Sweet of him. Her tone was calm, but her fingers fidgeted with the edge of a cushion, betraying her nerves. Do you two talk often? Lucas asked, keeping his tone light. Seems like you've been spending more time together. Emma glanced up at him, her smile faltering for a moment. Not really, she said, her voice quiet. Just when we happened to cross paths, he's been helpful lately. Lucas nodded, but his mind churned with questions. Eric didn't spend much time at the office. His work was mostly behind the scenes. That left plenty of time for other activities. The thought gnawed at Lucas as he sat in silence, watching Emma retreat to the kitchen. Something wasn't adding up, and Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that, for all their closeness as brothers, Eric was keeping something from him. Something that could shatter the trust Lucas had spent years building. The end of the year was always chaotic for Lucas. Holiday orders piled up, last-minute clients flooded the shop, and every day seemed like a race against the clock. It was both exhilarating and exhausting, leaving little time for anything else. Lucas welcomed the distraction. He kept his mind from wandering to unsettling thoughts about Eric and Emma. Maybe he was just being paranoid or jealous. Relationships, after all, were built on trust, weren't they? He told himself to let it go. Whatever tension he felt with Eric and Emma would pass. Instead, Lucas decided to focus on something positive. Emma's birthday. It was coming up in just a few weeks, right before Christmas. A perfect chance to show her how much he cared. He toyed with ideas for a gift, perhaps something personal she'd love. One chilly December morning, Lucas woke up early to head to work. The frost under his boots as he stepped outside. He was holding a trash bag in his hands. He was running late and eager to get the day started, his mind already filled with design revisions and production schedules. As he neared the trash bin, Lucas tripped over a loose paving stone, stumbling forward. The garbage bag slipped from his grip, hitting the ground with a dull thud. He cursed under his breath, bending down to gather the spilled trash. That's when something unusual caught his eye. Amid the crumpled wrappers and scraps of paper was a small white stick. Pregnancy test. Lucas froze, staring at the two unmistakable pink stripes on the test. 2 stripes. Positive. His breath hitched. For a moment, he forgot the cold biting at his fingers. A baby, he whispered to himself, his mind spinning. A rush of emotions flooded him. Joy, disbelief, confusion. He and Emma had talked about having children someday, but they hadn't been actively trying. And yet, here it was, the proof in his hand. Lucas couldn't stop the smile that crept across his face. He was going to be a father. But just as quickly, his thoughts turned uneasy. Why hadn't Emma said anything? Had she been waiting for the moment to tell him? Maybe she was planning a special surprise. That would be just like her. Always thoughtful. Always finding a way to make things memorable. Or was there another reason? Lucas shook his head, refusing to let darker thoughts take root. No, he wouldn't let himself go there. Emma was his wife. She loved him. If she hadn't told him yet, there was a good explanation. Gathering the trash and the test, Lucas stuffed everything back into the bag and tossed it into the bin. He wiped his hands on his jeans, exhaling a shaky breath. On the drive to work, his emotions swirled like a snowstorm. He imagined holding his child for the first time, teaching them to ride a bike, cheering them on at school events. But alongside the happiness, a small thread of unease wove through his thoughts. Lucas decided he wouldn't bring it up. Not yet. He'd wait for Emma to tell him in her own time. Whatever the reason for her secrecy, he would give her the space she needed. For now, he would focus on the joy. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. The days after Lucas discovered the pregnancy test dragged on like a slow-moving storm. Emma didn't mention anything about it, and Lucas struggled to keep his curiosity and worry at bay. Every time he thought about the test, his emotions teetered between joy and anxiety. Why was she keeping this from him? He told himself to wait, to be patient. Maybe she was planning to tell him on her birthday, which was just around the corner. But as the days ticked by and Emma remained silent, Lucas' unease only grew. On the night before her birthday, Lucas sat in their dimly lit living room, pretending to read a book. Emma was in the bedroom, scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by its soft glow. Lucas watched her from the corner of his eye, a knot tightening in his chest. He couldn't take it anymore. When Emma went to take a shower, leaving her phone on the nightstand, Lucas made his move. The phone was locked. For a moment, Lucas considered putting it down, but his worry overpowered his guilt. He entered Emma's birthday as the password, hands trembling slightly. To his relief and dread, it worked. Lucas scrolled through her messages, looking for anything that might explain her recent behavior. Then he saw it. A string of conversations between Emma and Eric. As he opened the chat, his heart pounded in his chest. The messages were casual at first, filled with inside jokes and playful banter. But as Lucas read further, his stomach dropped. What he read shook him to his core. He couldn't read anymore. His hands trembled as he put the phone back where he'd found it, his mind racing with the weight of what he had just uncovered. The next morning, Emma's birthday dawned crisp and clear, but Lucas felt like the world had shifted beneath his feet. The family had planned a dinner at his parents' house, and everyone was supposed to gather there to celebrate. Lucas went through the motions of the day, wrapping Emma's gift and making polite conversation, but inside, his thoughts churned. He couldn't look at her without hearing the words from the messages. He couldn't think of Eric without feeling the sting of betrayal. When they arrived at his parents' house that evening, the warm scent of roasted turkey and baked apples filled the air. His parents greeted them with cheerful smiles, and Eric was already there, helping set the table. Emma seemed relaxed, laughing with Lucas's mom as she admired the decorations. Lucas forced himself to smile and act normal, though every fiber of his being screamed otherwise. He watched Eric closely, looking for any signs that might confirm what he had read. Eric was his usual charming self, joking with their dad and carrying plates of food to the dining room. The dinner table was a picture of family harmony, but Lucas couldn't shake the undercurrent of tension building inside him. As they sat down to eat, Emma glanced at him, her smile soft and sweet. For a moment, Lucas wondered if he was overreacting. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for everything, but deep down, he knew the truth. And as the family raised their glasses to toast Emma's birthday, Lucas couldn't help but wonder if this celebration was the calm before a storm that would tear them all apart. The atmosphere at the dinner table had been deceptively warm, filled with clinking glasses and cheerful chatter. But Lucas had been simmering inside, his thoughts like a pressure cooker about to burst. The knowledge he carried gnawed at him, and the sight of Emma laughing with his family only made it worse. He couldn't hold it in any longer. "Emma," Lucas said, his voice louder than intended, cutting through the conversation. "Why aren't you drinking any wine tonight?" Emma froze for a brief second, then smiled politely. "I just don't feel like it," she said, her tone light but guarded. Lucas's eyes narrowed as he noticed the way his parents exchanged quick glances, the slight tension in as he reached for his water glass. Something wasn't right. "Maybe you're pregnant," Lucas said, his words deliberately pointed. The room fell silent. Forks paused mid-air, and the clink of glasses stopped. Everyone seemed to hold their breath. Emma hesitated for just a moment before smiling again, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, I am," she said, her voice steady. "I wanted to put off the news for later, but—" Surprise. Lucas scanned the room. Not one face showed genuine surprise. His parents tried, but their awkward, forced reactions only confirmed Lucas's suspicion. Eric, meanwhile, looked pale, his smile faltering. "Everyone already knows, don't they?" Lucas said, his voice quieter but laced with anger. Accept me. Lucas, that's not true, Emma began, but Lucas cut her off. Emma, are you pregnant and didn't tell me because the baby is Eric's? The words hit the table like a thunderclap. Eric, caught mid-bite, coughed violently, struggling to clear his throat. Their parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and Emma's eyes widened in shock, her face turning pale. What the hell are you talking about, Lucas? Emma snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. Before Lucas could respond, his father stepped in, his voice firm but cautious. Son, don't ruin the evening. Your words are rude and uncalled for. I think you need to take a moment, step outside, and get some air. The calm, dismissive tone of his father's voice sent a spark of rage through Lucas. He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. Don't, Lucas said, his voice shaking with anger. Don't try to brush this off like I'm imagining things. Judging by all of your reactions, you knew. You all knew Emma was pregnant, and yet I was kept in the dark like a fool. He turned his fiery gaze back to Emma. By the way, Emma, yesterday I saw your messages with Eric on your phone. Emma stiffened, her face flushing with a mix of anger and fear. I saw the one where you told Eric it was too early for me to know about the pregnancy. Lucas continued, his voice trembling with both fury and heartbreak. I read enough of your conversations to know something is going on between the two of you. Lucas, Emma started, but he didn't let her finish. And you, Lucas said, turning to his brother, his voice dripping with contempt. Thank you, Eric, for taking such good care of my wife. I didn't expect you to be such a scoundrel. Eric's face turned crimson, his hands gripping the edge of the table as if to steady himself. Lucas, you're jumping to conclusions, he stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of the accusation. Am I? Lucas shot back, his voice a roar now. Then why does it feel like I'm the last to know about this pregnancy? Why does your name keep coming up in her texts? Tell me, Eric. Tell me why I shouldn't believe what I'm starting to think. Their father stood abruptly, his voice booming. Enough, Lucas. This is not the time or place for this nonsense. But Lucas wasn't listening anymore. He pushed back his chair and stood, glaring at Eric and Emma, his chest heaving with emotion. You've all been hiding something from me, he said, his voice low and filled with anguish. I'm going to find out exactly what it is. The room was thick with tension, each word a match threatening to ignite the powder keg of emotions. Lucas stood, his face pale but his voice steady, though it quivered with rage. I won't let you all make a fool out of me, he said, his words cutting through the suffocating silence. When the baby is born, there will be a DNA test. I've seen enough of Eric and Emma comforting each other behind my back. What kind of family are you after that? Emma burst into tears, her hands covering her face as she shook with sobs. Her cries filled the room, but Lucas didn't waver. Parents jumped in immediately, their voices pleading for peace. His mother, her voice trembling, said, Lucas, please, let's calm down. This isn't the way to handle this. His father followed, his tone firm but desperate. We can't let this destroy everything. No matter what happens, we have to stick together. We have to protect the business, Lucas. Now is not the time for quarrels. Lucas turned to his father, his eyes burning with disbelief and fury. What the hell are you talking about, Dad? What business? My wife cheated on me with my brother and you're covering it up. What's wrong with all of you? Mother chimed in, her tone almost patronizing. Life has its twists and turns, Lucas, but these are just obstacles. Families overcome obstacles. We're all a family and we'll get through this somehow. Lucas clutched his head, his thoughts spinning. He turned to Emma, his voice raw with betrayal. How could you do this, Emma? And with my brother? My own brother? Emma wiped her tears with shaking hands, her voice trembling but filled with defiance. Lucas, you were never there for me, she said sharply. You were always busy with work, always at the office, always distracted. I needed someone to talk to, someone to lean on. Lucas shook his head in disbelief and turned to Eric. And you? What's your excuse? What do you lack? Eric, there are plenty of women out there, but you decided to take my wife? Are you insane? Eric fumbled for words, his face pale and his hands trembling. "Lucas, we didn't want to hurt you," he said, his voice almost pleading. "We didn't plan for this. We weren't trying to deceive you. We were just talking." "Talking?" Lucas barked, his voice dripping with contempt. "Talking? Don't insult me, Eric. You think I'm stupid? You think I can't see what's going on?" He looked around the table, his gaze bouncing from his parents to Emma to Eric. "I gave everything for all of you," he said, his voice breaking. "I worked hard to keep this family together, to keep this business running, and this is how you repay me? Not only do you betray me, but you can't even be honest about it. You're still evading, still hiding behind excuses." Lucas reached for his wine glass, draining it in one sharp gulp. He slammed it down on the table, the sound echoing in the tense silence. "You're no longer my family," he said, his voice low but resolute, "and I've seen your precious business in hell. Tomorrow I'll sign over my share. I leave everything to you. I want nothing to do with any of this." He turned to Emma, his gaze piercing. "And you, Emma, you can wait for the divorce papers. I'll send them soon. But I ask you for only one thing. Don't ever appear in my sight again. I owe you nothing. I give everything to all of you so that nothing even reminds me of this twisted family." With that, Lucas stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor as he pushed it back. He didn't wait for anyone to respond. He didn't look back at the table, at the stunned faces of his family, or at Emma's tear-streaked face. He walked out of the dining room, out of the house, and into the cold night. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound reverberating like the final note of a symphony. For Lucas, this was the end. The end of his marriage, the end of his relationship with his brother, and the end of the life he had worked so hard to build. Lucas moved swiftly in the days following the disastrous family dinner. He was a man of principle, and though the betrayal cut deep, he refused to let himself linger in the poisonous atmosphere of what used to be his life. He signed over his share of the family business without a fight, leaving the company, the wealth, and the legacy entirely in their hands. His father's words about sticking together and protecting the business echoed bitterly in his mind, but Lucas wasn't going to waste energy arguing. All Lucas took with him were the essentials, his clothes, his tools, and his laptop. Everything else stayed behind. The divorce with Emma was swift and quiet. There was no debate about the child's paternity. Everyone understood the truth, and with Lucas giving up his share of the family business, there was no point in haggling over finances or assets. For a while, Lucas tried to leave it all behind, focusing on rebuilding his life from the ground up. He found a modest apartment in a neighboring city and kept in touch with a few trusted colleagues from the jewelry company. These connections kept him informed about what was happening back home, though the news wasn't always welcome. Some employees confided in Lucas, expressing their frustration with how Eric had taken over the business. Eric was now the undisputed leader, basking in his newfound position of power. He had even started referring to himself as the visionary of the company, a title Lucas knew Eric hadn't earned. Many employees resented Eric's arrogance and missed the thoughtful leadership Lucas had provided. Through mutual friends, Lucas learned that Eric and Emma had officially confirmed their relationship. They were now an open couple, and Lucas's parents seemed to fully support them. It was clear to him now that his parents had chosen Eric, and perhaps they always had. He was furious, not just at his brother and ex-wife, but at his parents for their betrayal. But Lucas wasn't defeated. He hadn't spent years mastering the art of jewelry design and production just to let it all go to waste. If his family thought they could erase him, they were wrong. Quietly but determinedly, Lucas began laying the groundwork for something new. He reached out to investors and partners, leveraging his reputation in the industry to garner support. These were people who respected his craft, his work ethic, and his vision. They didn't see him as someone tied to the past. They saw him as the future. Within months, Lucas launched a new jewelry company, a direct competitor to his family's business. He poured every ounce of his energy into it, using the lessons he had learned over the years to create something fresh, innovative, and bold. His designs were modern yet timeless, capturing the imagination of customers and clients alike. The launch of Lucas's company sent ripples through the industry, and his former family business wasn't immune to the shockwaves. His competitors took notice. So did his family. Lucas was methodical in his approach. He didn't just set out to create a successful company. He wanted to build something that would overshadow the legacy he had left behind. He started by reaching out to key specialists from his family's business, designers, production leads, and sales managers who had been stifled under Eric's leadership. Lucas offered them freedom, better opportunities, and a vision they could believe in. His charm and credibility paid off. Several of the family company's best employees jumped ship, drawn by Lucas's reputation and the promise of being part of something dynamic and fresh. Lucas also targeted the business's most important clients, those who had long relied on his designs and expertise. It wasn't hard to sway them. Eric's arrogance and poor management had already strained relationships. With Lucas offering superior service and innovative designs, many clients made the switch without hesitation. As Lucas's business flourished, the cracks in his family's company grew into gaping fissures. Under Eric's chaotic leadership, the business stumbled into a management crisis. Orders were mishandled, deadlines missed, and key employees left in droves. Profits plummeted, and the once proud company began to lose its footing. One night, Lucas's phone rang unexpectedly. The number was familiar. It was Eric. Lucas answered hesitantly, and immediately he was greeted by Eric's slurred, angry voice. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" Eric spat, his words thick with alcohol. "Taking my employees, my clients, ruining everything we built?" Lucas stayed calm, his voice steady. "You did this to yourself, Eric. Don't blame me for cleaning up the mess you made. You think you're better than me?" Eric sneered. "You were always the golden boy, always Dad's favorite, until I showed them who you really are. I played them, Lucas. I played Emma, too, made her see how perfect you weren't. And it worked. You lost everything, but you're still a damn scoundrel." Lucas clenched his jaw, but he refused to let Eric's drunken ramblings get to him. "You're drunk, Eric. Go sleep it off," he said coldly. "And don't call me again." He hung up and sat in silence for a moment, his mind churning. Eric's words confirmed what Lucas had long suspected, that his brother had manipulated everyone around him to push Lucas out. But hearing it aloud only hardened Lucas's resolve. Through mutual acquaintances, Lucas began to hear more about Eric's downward spiral. The company's failure had driven him deeper into alcohol, and his erratic behavior alienated what little support he had left. Emma, meanwhile, was left to raise the child largely on her own. Though she had once believed in Eric, his actions began to wear her down. He cheated openly, often disappearing for nights at a time. Emma, who had once sought comfort in Eric, now found herself trapped in an unhappy relationship. Their parents, once so insistent on keeping the family together, were now consumed by regret. The failing business weighed heavily on them, as did the fractured relationships between their sons. The depression that settled over them was impossible to hide, and their pride in the family legacy was now replaced by shame and despair. Lucas, however, had moved on. His new company continued to grow, his team thriving under his guidance. Though he still heard whispers of his family's struggles, he chose not to dwell on them. He had already left them behind.